Green Dirt Farm, for those of you who aren't familiar with us, we're a grass-based sheep dairy located in northwestern Missouri. So we make about 8 different styles of cheese, like I mentioned before. Our next cheese is Ruby, and I mentioned it earlier that it's a style that we made patterned after the classic Italian cheese Robiola. And it's similar to the Italians. Italian cheesemakers are frequently blend milks in Italy, because of course sheep milk is very popular in Italy. But similar to us, they have the economic challenge that sheep produce very small volumes of milk. So it's been very traditional over the years for Italians to blend their sheep milk with other milks. And This style of robiola is often referred to as a due latte style meaning two milks. And ours has sheep and cow milk, and that we have that beautiful Jersey cow's milk from our farmer that's just a little bit nearby to us. Our ruby, if you go back to the previous picture, you'll notice that it has kind of two different rinds going on. In that previous picture was ruby the way we made it last year in 2019. And if you take a close look at that, Michael, can you go back to that previous picture? If you take a close look at that, you'll see it has much more the character of a Bloomy rind style cheese, with the rind made up of Penicillium candidum, the white mold that we typically associate with brie and camembert. But over time, we decided, well, when back in 2019, when we were making Ruby, we decided we wanted to give Ruby a little bit more complexity to her flavor, because she was a little flat, we thought. And so we decided that one of the things that we would do to contribute a bit more flavor would be to wash the rind. And that's the ruby that we have this year. Our ruby is much more, has much more washed rind character to it. Previously, we only washed it for 2 to 3 weeks and then let the white rind grow in. And this year we've washed it probably more like 5 weeks. And that's really developed that orange Brevibacterium linens color on the outside, that and given it also its the funk. You may have noticed if you have your cheese sitting out at room temperature, and I hope you do, that you now have a room that is permeated by the smell of ruby. It's a lovely, funky, washed rind style of cheese that we're really enjoying. This particular batch is creamy and milky, and has lots of good sort of cabbagey, kind of meaty cabbagey flavors. There's also a little bitterness on the rind, and that is coming through. This is an older batch. Um, that's really coming through. If you like a little bit of bitterness, I think it's pretty well balanced. What do you think, Michael?
I think it's very classic in its flavor characteristic. Um, Having the washed rind on here, you're exactly right about the cabbage, and I happen to love cabbage. I love washed rinds. As a cheese judge, washed rinds are my favorite to be able to judge because of the diversity. I know that there are a lot of people that are hesitant to be able to pick up a washed rind because of the how aromatic they can be. But I can say that in most instances, having that aroma tells you that there's some really interesting flavors that are going to be with the cheese. And that goes without saying with this, because this is really, it's all about the butter. It's all about some earthiness and that cabbage and that, really distinct flavors. You know, this is a unique cheese that on any cheese board would separate your cheese board out from the ordinary. You know, as they talk about, you know, doing something on a cheese board that really brings out something special. This would do that. So, what would you suggest on the pairing on this one?
I love this with Effie's oatcakes. Effie's
Okay.
oatcakes are they're, I like to tell people they're really a cookie, but they're fabulous. And the Effie's oatcakes has that little, that little, the sweetness and the oatiness. I just love it with Ruby. Also think it goes with the Veneto. Everything goes with Veneto. Mm,
It's,
and
you
stout,
know,
that's a good choice.
the oat cakes are a little sweet, but there's some saltiness to it, and that saltiness really brings out more of this butter. You really, that butter just jumps right out, and it's actually like having a slab of butter on this now. So it's a tea cake with oat and the butter flavors that's naturally in it. This is just a decadent, you know, cheese snack, and
Yeah.
I think that is a really wonderful pairing. In your information, you said that a little bit of a sweet or creamy beer. And so, you know, I was thinking about what I've paired before. And so I went with a brown ale, and this is Cigar City. This is a local brewery, has three daughters, is, and this is the Maduro Brown. So really classic brown ale, no hoppiness. It's not a stout where you have the bitterness in here. So this is all malt. So it's really, really a malty beer with the butter, and then with the biscuit is just fabulous. It's
Yeah, that sounds great.
really rich.
I wish I was tasting that. That sounds really good. Now, creamy beers are fantastic with Ruby. I also like it with champagnes and bubblies, because again, you mentioned earlier with the Ozark, that kind of mouth scrubbing action of carbonation, how that
Mhm.
really helps with cheeses that have a lot of richness to them. And so, yeah, the bubbles go really well with the Ruby as well.
So how did you decide to do this style of cheese? This is not, you know, I mean, again, it's like you you've chosen the most difficult animals with the lowest yield, the grazing, and then you choose a cheese that is not, you know, that is not, it falls into any simple, gee, I can make this really easy. This one that requires so much love and time. Why did you choose, why did you go that way?
Oh, I chose to make cheeses that I really loved. I was very lucky. At, I had a fantastic childhood growing up on a series of small farms, but I had an aunt who owned a gourmet cheese shop when I was a teenager, and I would go at the holidays and help her sell cheese and do her catering because that was the busiest time of the year for her. And she taught me to love fine cheese. And in fact, I was living in San Francisco in the mid 80s, and I got to go with her. She would come out and visit me, and we'd go to the fancy food show together. And I think that was my original inspiration for cheese. But she taught me about the fine, soft ripened cheeses of Europe, and I just fell in love with those. They weren't the cheeses of my childhood for sure, but because I had that introduction to them through her, I just have always gravitated towards those styles of cheese. I love the flavors in them. And one of the things that we do with our sheep milk, which is relatively unusual, is to create soft ripened cheeses with sheep milk. You don't find that very often. I really I love the Italian style mixed milk cheeses. I love Taleggio and Robiola, and that was my real inspiration for making these cheeses. It was not born out of very much pragmatic or practical impulse. It was all, wanting to learn and craft the cheeses that I love the most.
So when you're making this, obviously, you're going to be getting into the season again of grazing and lambing and that. What typically, once you get this ready for shipping, about what's the parameters for its shelf life? In other words, what happens in 10 days or 30 days or 45 days, the characteristics that you expect from it?
Sure. Well, most of our soft ripened cheeses have an arc that's about 12 weeks long. So most of our cheeses like Bossa, our washed rind cheeses like Bossa and Robiola, the softer cheeses, and our Bloomy rind styles like our Dirt Lover and our Woolly Rind, those cheeses um, really progress through a ripening arc from when they're very young and fresh to about 12 weeks old. They become ammoniated and bitter and really not very palatable for eating. But typically, right around 6 to 8 weeks, we feel that they're at their peak. When we're shipping cheese direct to customers through our website, we try to choose the cheeses so that they will arrive in that 6 to 8 week peak window. So our customers will have a week to 2 weeks to eat them, or 3 weeks, depending. But we also find that our customers are really varied in how they like the cheeses. Some of our customers love our Dirt Lover, for example, when it's very fresh and it's almost has a texture of feta. But then if you wait and as it ripens, ripens from the outside in towards a center core. And if you wait until it's like about 3/4 the way ripened, that's at about 8 to 9 weeks of from its made date. It will have tremendous complexity and flavor development that's very different than it was at 1 to 2 weeks of age, right out of the aging cave. When we're selling to a cheese shop or to a distributor, that's a different thing altogether. We try to ship to them when the cheeses are really young so that they will have the maximal shelf life for getting it into the stores.
When I received the cheeses, they were wrapped beautifully in a unique wrap. Can you talk about that?
Sure, that's a special wrap that we get from a cheese specialty supply house called Fromagex. It's a French company and French and Canadian company, and they make specialty cheese wraps that allow the cheese to continue to breathe and develop on the shelf. So once it's wrapped in that cheese, as long as it hasn't been cut into, it often will continue to ripen normally for 3 to 4 weeks once you've got it in your refrigerator in that special wrapping paper.
So I'm not going to finish my cheese today. And so what would be your suggestion for me to be able to wrap it up?
Well, I normally wrap it back into the paper that we have. If you're not too squeamish about the fact that on the cut edges of the cheese, it is likely to develop some mold if you don't get to it for another couple of weeks. If you're okay with cutting that off, I would recommend that you just wrap it back up in that same wrapping paper. If you really want to keep it from developing any mold on the cut surfaces, I would wrap it in tightly in some plastic wrap. But I would still get to it within 2 weeks. Don't leave it sitting in your fridge. It'll turn into a fuzzy mess.
Let's talk about mold, because typically Taleggio comes in almost like a green furry animal. So that's mold is inevitable in many ways. And so on this particular cheese, what would you do if you do pick up some mold?
Well, all of these cheeses already have molds on them. They're naturally on those rinds. We actually intentionally populate the rinds with molds. These are good molds. They're not. There's nothing unhealthy about them. and they're a natural part of the cheese making process. But in your refrigerator, your cheeses are likely to pick up some more blue molds and some more white molds that might be present in your refrigerator. I don't think that they are anything to worry about. They can just be cut off and you can consume the cheese. But some people are hesitant to do that, and but I encourage you to with these cheese molds not to worry. I'm so glad that I got a chance to tell you about our farm and our cheeses. Thank you for inviting me, Michael.
Thank you so much for taking the time today. Thank you for the cheeses and the spreads. They're magnificent. And, you know, this will be posted up on my YouTube channel and be up here in the next couple of days. And once everything's back in stock, you can taste along with us. So
Okay,
thank you
great.
for joining us. And Sarah, thank you so much for today.
I appreciate it, Michael. Take care.
All right, you too. Bye-bye.
Bye-bye.